Jesus gave them apostolic authority, traditions, and teachings because the Old Testament law was invalid. We see all that emphatically picked up in the 4th century by people trying to assume authority and the priesthood and rule over Christians during the ancient days. This is, I mean, they literally just said, oh, the Old Testament's out. We now go off the teachings of Jesus, even though we can't define what that is, but take our sacraments, take our traditions, we'll make up the details for you, and trust in our authority because we received apostolic tradition. This is a teaching of Gnosticism. Manly P. Hall, if anyone knows who that is. If not, you'll have to look him up. It doesn't matter if you know who he is right now. His words say enough. Manly P. Hall, in explaining Gnosticism in a book that he wrote, he said an effort was made during the Middle Ages to resurrect the principles of Gnosticism, but owing to the destruction of their records, the material necessary wasn't available. Even today, there are evidences of Gnostic philosophy in the modern world, but they bear other names and their true origin is not suspected. Many of the Gnostic concepts have actually been incorporated into the dogmas of our Christian church, and our newer interpretations of Christianity are often along the lines of Gnostic emanationism. So this idea of Gnosticism and this whole system they had of the pleroma, casting shadows into the world to create matter, this idea of the demiurge, which was the thing that created everything, but he wasn't the actually true God. He was just, brought into the process by the true God who was outside of the whole process. And you can ascend to be a part of them later. So here, we're just going to go over to some of the principles that Gnostic Christians were being taught. These are just a few of them. But there was a whole group of Gnostic Christians that arose late 1st, early 2nd century AD and became a real problem for people, for genuine believers in that day, because they had this extremely errant, heretical, as Irenaeus would call it, version of theology to where they said the true God had a special essence that was different from everything else. Does that sound familiar? The true God is outside of space and creation. I've seen that argued 1,000 times. God can't have a body because what space would he inhabit? Because he's outside of space and creation. They even go in to say, well, before everything was created, they couldn't have had a real body because you need space and time. And obviously they're using language that more refers to philosophical constructs. And in many modern arguments, they blend that into heliocentrism, this idea that there must have been some sort of fabric of reality for them to be inside of. But that is a argument of Gnosticism. The true God, another argument of Gnosticism, is that the true God is greater than the creator God. So all created matter was a different substance than the true God. So this is a claim of Gnosticism. And yes, I believe a lot of these ideas have infiltrated Christianity. They also believe that all created matter was evil. So therefore, if I do say that spiritual beings are consistent of the essence of water and the power of God, that doesn't make any of that somehow unholy, unless you believe in Gnostic principles. They also teach that Jesus appeared in human form and wasn't actually only a man while seen in the flesh. If that doesn't sound like the hypostasis that's taught by Trinitarians, I don't know what would. Jesus gave them apostolic authority, traditions, and teachings because the Old Testament law was invalid. We see all that emphatically picked up in the 4th century by people trying to assume authority and the priesthood and rule over Christians during the ancient days. This is, I mean, they literally just said, oh, the Old Testament's out. We now go off the teachings of Jesus, even though we can't define what that is, but take our sacraments, take our traditions, we'll make up the details for you, and trust in our authority because we received apostolic tradition. This is a teaching of Gnosticism. They also taught that salvation was achieved through individual enlightenment, not through the priesthood of Christ. They also taught all mankind had a divine spark within them, and once that spark ascended through the upper atmosphere, it could be united with God. This is also what I see taught at churches who don't believe, even the Catholics, who don't believe that God has a literal body, just like the Pope has announced. And I can't remember the name of that Pope. But a lot of Protestant churches teach this as well. And they think that when you're resurrected, you're going to heaven. And in fact, the gospel of the kingdom teaches you're going to inherit the earth, and the kingdom of heaven's coming down to the earth. You don't spend eternity in heaven. You spend on the earth if you get resurrected. And they also, the Gnostics, in like manner, taught there was no literal coming kingdom of God, but that the kingdom was now within each believer. I see that rampant in the churches today. And they take the corporeal, physical nature out of heaven, the angelic beings in heaven, the Father's body itself, and this is why we're arguing this today.